Beyond words, our souls collide in the rhythm where dreams reside. Beyond words, we touch the sky.
Welcome to the Beyond Words Deep Dive Sessions, an inspiring exploration of the book Beyond Words by Marcia and John.
Today, we're going to be diving into the fascinating world of perception, like how our brains filter all that information overload that's constantly like bombarding us. And we're going to be using excerpts from the book Beyond Words as our guide for this deep dive. So get ready to see the world through a whole new lens.
Ooh, I love that. A whole new lens. It's like it's so true. We're often just totally unaware of all that filtering happening in our minds, you know?
Right. Like we just assume we're seeing everything.
Yeah.
But our brains are actually playing this like really high stakes game of keep it or delete it.
Exactly. And Beyond Words uses this great metaphor of frames on walls, you know?
Okay.
So imagine your brain as this art gallery, right? Each frame is like a way you see the world.
Okay, I like that. So I'm picturing it. So someone might have a frame for like work, one for family, another for politics.
Exactly. And just like we all have those art preferences, you gravitate towards certain styles, our brains are naturally drawn to information that already fits in our existing frames, like all those pre-existing beliefs and experiences we carry around.
So it's not even just what we're like consciously paying attention to, but what our brains even let us notice in the first place.
Absolutely. Think about like the last time you were in a crowded cafe.
Okay.
All those sights and sounds and smells, did you process every single little detail?
Oh, no way. That'd be way too much.
Exactly. Your brain was doing some major filtering behind the scenes, deciding what was important for you to even notice.
And it's just doing that all the time.
Constantly.
Wow. That actually makes me think of that example from the book about solar eclipses. Have you ever seen a solar eclipse?
Yeah, once. Years ago. Pretty incredible, right?
Right. Well, the book mentions how people use those welding helmets
Oh, yeah.
to view it safely. So you're intentionally filtering out all that intense light so you can actually focus on the shape of the sun without, like, hurting your eyes.
It's a great analogy for how our brains work all the time. And we're not even just filtering light, we're filtering information, emotions, our own thoughts. And just like with the welding helmet, it's actually essential for us to function.
So our brains are like these very selective bouncers, deciding what gets past the velvet rope and into, like, our conscious awareness.
I love that analogy. And, Beyond Words really emphasizes just how much information we're talking about here. Every single second, our brains are just flooded with millions of sensory impulses. What we see, hear, feel, smell, all of it.
Millions. Seriously.
Yeah.
No wonder our brains need a good filter.
It's true. And I mean, could you imagine trying to process all of that? It would just take an insane amount of energy.
Right.
Your brain, think about this, only makes up about 2% of your body weight,
Okay.
but it uses a whopping 20% of your energy.
Wow, 20%?
Yes.
That's more than any other organ.
Exactly. Our brains are energy hogs.
Right.
And so they're constantly working to conserve that energy. And they do that by prioritizing what lines up with our existing patterns and beliefs.
Okay, so filtering keeps our brains from like a total system overload. But isn't there a downside to all this filtering? I mean, don't we miss out on stuff?
That's the paradox, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because we're filtering out all that potential distraction, but also potentially really important information. It all comes down to how our brains decide what matters. And that's where things get really interesting, because our brains don't just filter, they're also meaning-making machines.
Okay.
Constantly looking for patterns and connections, trying to create a coherent narrative out of the information that gets through.
So it's not enough for our brains to just decide what's important enough to, like, notice. They also have to figure out what it all means.
Precisely. And if the meaning isn't, like, readily apparent, our brains will actually create it.
Wait, create it? You mean our brains just make stuff up?
Well, in a way, yeah. Think about it. Have you ever seen something totally out of context? Like a single shoe just lying in the middle of the road?
Okay, yeah.
Does your brain just, like, shrug and move on?
Now that you mention it, probably not.
Right.
Yeah.
Our brains crave that meaning, even when there's, like, no obvious explanation.
Yeah.
And we're hardwired to fill in those blanks, usually by using our existing frame.
Right. Those beliefs and experiences we were just talking about.
Exactly.
Okay, that makes sense. But it also sounds like it could lead to some pretty big assumptions.
Oh, absolutely. And this is where all those aha moments come in. When we suddenly realize our brain's been, like, weaving this whole narrative that might not even match up with reality.
So we have to, like, constantly be checking our assumptions, making sure those frames on our mental walls are still, relevant.
Exactly. And you know what? Beyond Words actually has a great example for this.
Okay.
It's Daniel Kahneman's concept of fast thinking, slow thinking. Are you familiar?
Yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah.
It's about those two different modes our brains use, right, for processing information.
Right. You've got that fast, intuitive one that relies on all those mental shortcuts we've developed. And then you've got the slower, more deliberate one. That's the more analytical one.
Mhm.
And a lot of times that fast thinking, that gets influenced by our brain's filtering system.
So how does that work? Like in real life? Give me an example.
Okay, how about this classic one from Kahneman's book? It's called The Racket and Ball Puzzle.
Okay, hit me with it.
All right, so a racket and a ball cost $1.10 together. The racket costs $1 more than the ball. So how much does the ball cost?
10 cents. Wait, hold on. That feels like a trap.
It is, because our fast-thinking brain jumps to that answer.
Okay.
Sounds logical at first, just based on the numbers, but if you actually slow down and engage that slow thinking...
Okay, hold on. Let me think. If the ball was 10 cents
Yeah,
and the racket is $1 more, it has to be 5 cents.
exactly.
Okay.
The racket is $1.05. Ball is 0.05 cents. Total is $1.10.
Okay. My brain feels a little tricked, but I see it now.
And that's exactly the point. It just highlights how our fast thinking, working with our brain's filtering can sometimes lead us to conclusions that are quick, but not necessarily accurate.
So we just like default to our existing assumptions without even realizing it,
Yeah.
which means,
Which means, even though we're all experiencing the same world through these filters, those filters are shaped by our own individual experiences and beliefs.
right?
So your reality is going to be different from mine, and that's okay.
Wow. So what I might think is like a perfectly logical conclusion, somebody else could see as totally off base.
Exactly. Because your truth, which you've built from your experiences and filters, might not be the same as somebody else's. And that's why understanding this whole concept is so important, especially when it comes to like communication and relationships.
Okay, yeah, I see where you're going with this. So how does understanding all this filtering, how does that help us have better conversations? Because if everyone's walking around with these totally different filters shaping their view of the world, no wonder we have so many misunderstandings.
Exactly. Think about it this way. When you're sharing an idea with someone, it's almost like you're trying to get them to see the world through your frame. Like you want to hang your frame on their mental wall.
Right. But they've already got their own gallery going on in there.
Exactly. You wouldn't barge into someone's home and just start like rearranging all their artwork, right?
Well, that's just rude.
Right. And yet that's kind of what we do in conversations sometimes. We try to force our ideas onto other people without even stopping to consider their perspective first.
Okay, so then how do we avoid doing that? How can we at least make sure that our frames are given a fair shot, like on someone else's wall?
It really comes down to shifting our goal.
Okay.
Instead of like trying to win the argument, try to reach a place of understanding. So instead of trying to dominate the conversation, we aim for alignment.
Alignment. I like that.
Yeah.
It's more about finding some kind of common ground than it is about proving who's right or wrong.
Yeah.
Right. But how do we actually do that? Because it sounds great in theory, but like, especially in the heat of the moment, that seems kind of tricky.
It definitely takes practice, right?
No.
But a really good place to start is something you've probably heard before, Stephen Covey's principle.
Yeah.
Seek first to understand, then to be understood.
Oh, yeah. From 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. A classic.
Exactly.
Oh, so how does that apply to having better conversations? Does it just mean like being a good listener?
Well, being a good listener is a big part of it, for sure. But it's even more than that, because it's about actively trying to see the world through their filter, you know? So why is that frame on their wall? What experiences made them value that perspective? What need is it fulfilling for them?
So it's about empathy,
Yes.
putting yourself in their shoes,
Yeah.
trying to see from their point of view.
Exactly. And, here's a really powerful idea from Beyond Words. They say every behavior, even the negative ones, they all stem from some kind of positive intent.
Okay, wait. Explain that. So
Totally.
how can a negative behavior, like how can that have a positive intention behind it?
Well, think about it this way. When someone's being difficult or behaving badly, they're usually not doing it to just be mean, right? They're trying to achieve something. Like they're trying to fulfill some need. Maybe it's a need for attention, validation, maybe security, or even just to like protect themselves from getting hurt.
Okay. That is a very interesting way to look at it. So instead of just focusing on the negative behavior, we should try to figure out what that positive intent is.
Exactly. Because once you understand that positive intent, you can actually start to find much more constructive ways to deal with the situation.
Right. Right. Acknowledge the need without condoning, whatever they're doing.
Exactly.
Find that win-win, right?
Yeah. And Beyond Words talks about how this whole ability to uncover that positive intent is crucial for really building empathy and finding that common ground.
This has been so eye-opening. We've covered so much, from how our brains filter information to how important it is to seek alignment in conversations. It all kind of ties together, doesn't it?
It really does. Our brains are filtering everything constantly based on those past experiences, which creates those unique realities for each of us. And to actually connect, we need to understand their filters, those frames on their wall.
It's not about like forcing our view. It's more about building bridges.
Exactly. And the really cool thing is that those frames on our walls, they're not even static. They're always evolving.
Really?
As we encounter new information and experiences and different perspectives, they change.
Wow. So every conversation has the potential to reshape how we see the world.
Absolutely. It just shows you how powerful, a genuine dialogue can be. When we approach our conversations with curiosity and this willingness to really understand, we're opening ourselves up to so much possibility for growth and transformation.
This deep dive has given us so much to think about. Before we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final thought. What is one frame on your wall that you've never really questioned? Why is it there? What purpose does it serve? It might be a belief, a value, maybe even just a way of looking at things, but just take some time to examine it. You might be surprised at what you discover.
Such a good point to end on. This was great. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. And thank you to all of you for listening. Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep those conversations flowing.
Thank you for listening. Give us a like and share your comments. Order the book via the link in the comments. Stay tuned for more.
Beyond words, our souls collide in the rhythm where dreams reside.